Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. Chapter 4 The Keeper of the Keys. Boom! They knocked again. Dudley jerked away. "Where's the cannon?" he said stupidly. There was a crash behind them, and Uncle Vernon came skidding into the room. He was holding rifle in his hands. Now they knew that what had been in the long, thin package he had brought with them. "Who's there?" he shouted. "I want your armed." There was a pause, then smash! The door was hit with such force that it swung clean off its hinge and with a deafening crash landed flat on the floor. A giant of man was standing in the doorway. His face was almost completely hidden by a long, shaggy mane hair and a wild, tangled beard. But you could make out his eyes, glinting like black beetles under all the hair. The giant squeezed his way into the hut, stooping so that his head just brushed the ceiling. He bent down, picked up the door, and fitted it easily back into its frame. The noise of the storm outside dropped a little. He turned to look at them all. "Couldn't make up a cup of tea, could ya? It's not been an easy journey." He stood over the sofa where Dudley sat frozen with fear. "Budge up, ya great lump," said the stranger. Dudley squeaked and ran to hide behind his mother, who was crouching terrified behind Uncle Vernon. "And here's Harry," said the giant. Harry looked up into the fierce, wild, shadowy face and saw the beetle's eyes were crinkled in a smile. "Last time I saw you, you was only a baby," said the giant. "You look a lot like your dad, but you've got your mom's eyes." Uncle Vernon made a funny rasping noise. "I demand that you leave at once, sir," he said. "You are breaking and entering." Shut up, Dudley. "Yeah, you great prune," said the giant. He reached over the back of the sofa, jerked the gun off Uncle Vernon's head, bent it to a knot, and easily as it had been made up of rubber, and threw it down a corner of the room. Uncle Vernon made another funny noise, like a mouse being trodden on. "Anyway, Harry," said the giant, turning his back on the Dursleys, "a very happy birthday to ya. Got some mats for you. Here, I might have sat on it some point, but it'll taste all right." From an inside pocket of his back overcoat, he pulled a slightly squashed box. Harry opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a large, sticky chocolate cake with "Happy Birthday, Harry" written on in a green icing. Harry looked up at the giant. He meant to say thank you, but the words got lost on the way to his mouth, and he said instead was, "Who are you?" The giant chuckled. "True, I haven't introduced myself. Reverend Hagrid, keeper of the keys and grounds of Hogwarts." He held out an enormous hand and shook Harry's whole arm. "What about that tea tin, he said, rubbing his hand together. "I'd not say to tur summat stronger if you've got it, mind." His eyes fell on the empty grate with the sharp chip backs in it, and he shuddered. He bent down over the fireplace. They couldn't see what he was doing, but when he drew back a second later, there was a roaring fire there. It felt the whole damp hot with flickering light, and Harry felt the warmth wash over him as though he'd shrunk into a hot bath. The giant sat back down on the sofa, sagging under his weight, and began tucking all sorts of things out of the pocket to his coat. A copper kettle, a squashy package of sausage, a poker, a teapot, several cheap mugs, and a bottle of some amber liquid was full of the sound and small sizzling sausage. Nobody said a thing while the giant was working, but as he slid the first 6 fat little, Uncle Vernon said sharply, "Don't touch anything he gives you, Dudley." The giant chuckled darkly. "Your great pudding of son don't need fatten any more, Dudley. Don't worry." He passed the sausage to Harry, who was so hungry he had never tasted anything so wonderful, but he still couldn't take his eyes off the giant. Finally, as nobody seemed about to explain anything, he said, "I'm sorry, but I still don't really know who you are." The giant took a gulp of tea and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Call me Hagrid," he said. "Everyone does. And like I told you, I'm keeper of the keys of Hogwarts. You'll know all about Hogwarts, of course." No," said Harry. Hagrid looked shocked. "Sorry," Harry said quickly. "Sorry?" barked Hagrid, turning to stare at Dudley, who shrank back in the shadows. "It's them as should be sorry. I knew you weren't getting your letters, but I never thought you wouldn't even know about Hogwarts. For crying out loud. Did you ever wonder where your parents learned it all?" "Oh, what?" asked Harry. "Oh, what?" Hagrid thundered. "No, wait just 1 second." He had leaped to his feet. In his anger, he seemed to feel the whole hut. The Dursleys were cowering against the walls. "Do you mean to tell me?" he glowed. "Do you mean to tell me?" he growled at the Dudleys. "That's this boy, knowing nothing about anything." Harry thought this was going a bit far. He had been to school, after all, and his smirk wasn't bad. "I know something," he said. "I can, do math and stuff." But Hagrid simply waved his hand and said, "About our world. I mean, your world, my world, your parents' world." "What world?" Hagrid looked as if he was about to explode. "Dursleys!" he boomed. Uncle Vernon, who had gone very pale, whispered something that sounded like "Mimble Wimble." Hagrid stared widely at Harry. "But you must know about your mom and dad. I mean, you're famous. You're famous. About my mom and dad?" "My mom and dad weren't famous, are they?" You didn't know? You didn't know?" Hagrid ran his finger through his hair, fixing Harry with a bold stare. "You didn't know what you are?" he said finally. Uncle Vernon suddenly found his voice. "Stop!" he commanded. "Stop right there, sir! I forbid you to tell the boy anything." A braver man than Vernon Dursley would have squealed under the furious look Hagrid now gave him. When Hagrid spoke, his eyes shriveled with rage. You never told him? Never told him what was in the letter Dumbledore left for him. I was there. I saw Dumbledore leave it Dursley's. And you kept it for him all this year? Kept what from me? Said Harry eagerly. Stop! I forbid you! Yelled Uncle Vernon in panic. Aunt Petunia gave a gasp of horror. Go boil your hands, both of you, said Hagrid. Harry, you're a wizard. There was silence inside the hut. Only the sea was the whistling wind could be heard. I'm a what? Gasped Harry. A wizard, of course, said Hagrid, sitting back down on the sofa with ground and sank even lower. And something good, and I'd said, once you've been trained up a bit. With your mama and dad like yours, what else you could be? And I reckon it about time. If ya read your letter. Harry stretched out his hand and last to take the yellowish envelope addressed in emerald green to Mr. H. Potter, the floor, hot on the rock, the sea. He pulled out the letter and read, Hogwarts of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster Albus Dumbledore. Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Score, Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwort, International Comfort of Wizard. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you've been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl by no later than July 31. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall. Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmaster. Questions explode inside Harry's head like fireworks, and he couldn't decide which to ask first. After a few minutes, he stammered. What does it mean? They wake my owl? Galloping Gunners to remind me, said Harry, clapping hands to his forehead with enough force to knock over a cart horse, and from yet another pocket inside his overcoat he pulled an owl, a real, live, ruffled-looking owl, a long quill, and a roll of parchment. With his tongue being his teeth, he scribbled a note that Harry could read upside down. Dear Professor Dumbledore, given Harry his letter, taking him to buy his things tomorrow. Weather's horrible. Hope you're well, Hagrid. Hagrid rolled up the note, gave it to the owl, which chapped in its beak, went to the door, and threw the owl out into the storm. Then he came back and sat down as though he was as normal as talking on the telephone. Harry realized his mouth was open and closed it quickly. Where was I? Said Hagrid, but at the moment Uncle Vernon, still ashen-faced but looked very angry, moved into the fine firelight. He's not going, he said. Harry grunted. I'd like to see a great muggle like you stop him, he said. A what? Said Harry, interested. A muggle, said Harry. It's what we call a non-magic folk like them. And it's your bad luck you grew up in family of the biggest muggle I ever laid eyes on. We swore when we took him in we'd put a stop to that rubbish, said Uncle Vernon. Swore we'd stamp it out of him. Wizard indeed!